Okay, so this is the video tutorial that I promised you guys about how to graph quadratic equations. And so we looked at an example today in class, x squared plus 6x plus 5. So we have the equation y equals x squared plus 6x plus 5, and we learned today that the first step to graphing this equation is going to be to find the coefficients. And we had those coefficients labeled as a, b, and c. A is the number in front of the x squared, b is the number in front of the x, and c is the number that has no variable with it there at the end. And so in our case, we have our coefficients a equals 1, b equals 6, and c equals 5. And so we are going to use those coefficients, first of all, to find the axis of symmetry, and through that to find the vertex. So, in order to find the vertex, first we have to find the axis of symmetry. And we had this formula, x equals negative b over 2a. And so in the case of our current equation, negative b is going to be negative 6, and then a is going to be 1. So we take our 6 and our 1, we plug them into the formula, and we get negative 6 over 2 times 1, which is going to give us a negative 3. And we can see then that our axis of symmetry is going to be right over here at x equals negative 3. Once we have the axis of symmetry, the next thing we're going to want to do is find out what y is at the value x equals negative 3. So we have our equation, and we're going to take our negative 3 and plug it in so that we can find out what our y value is. And so we do the calculation just like we did in class today, and we're going to find that y equals negative 4. So we can plot a point at negative 3, negative 4, and that is going to be our vertex of our quadratic equation. The next thing we need to do is find the y-intercept. In order to do that, we had found that we use the point x equals 0. So again, we're going to write our quadratic, and we're going to plug in 0 for our x value. And we see that when we do this, the first two terms are going to go away because 0 squared is just 0, and 6 times 0 is also 0, so we're left with y equals 5. And I've plotted that right there on the y-axis. There's a point at y equals 5 when x is 0. So now we have 2 of our 3 points. We need one more point on this half of our quadratic that will allow us to graph half of it, and then we know that we can just reflect across that axis of symmetry. So to find one more point, I'm going to use something near the vertex. Our vertex is at negative 3, negative 4, so I'm going to choose to use x equals negative 2, just because that's quite close to our vertex. So again, I write our quadratic, and I'm going to plug in negative 2, and I'm going to solve or evaluate at that point, and I get negative 2, negative 3. So now I can plot that point, the third red point there at negative 2, negative 3. I can connect those, and then I can reflect the green points across our axis of symmetry are just reflections of the red points that I had already plotted, and that allows me to plot the whole thing.